Hello and welcome to our latest episode of the Rethink podcast. It's Paul Mahomey here with my co-host George Shepard. Hey George, how are we doing?
Hey, Paul. Top of the morning to you. That's how you say
It's
it over there, right?
afternoon here, so that Irish joke doesn't
Oh,
work today, I'm afraid,
yeah.
George.
None of
But
fears.
welcome to all of our live audience here as well, who are here with us on Zoom. Great to have you here. And we have a very special guest today. We've got Peter Sage in the house. Hey Peter, how are you doing?
Hey, Paul, outstandingly marvelous with a capital O.
Wonderful, fantastic stuff. So, George, how's your week been?
A lot of fun. As you can see, I've got a bit of a different background for those who are very aware. You can see that things are a little bit in a different spot. So that was kind of fun. I took my studio was 4 times the size of my studio now, and I had to kind of like figure out how to make this thing smaller and not lose, the whole thing. So that's been kind of interesting. Other than that, it's hot here, as they would say. In Florida, it's very hot. So I'm sweating, and I probably will get even more sweaty as we go. This is the first podcast in this new studio. So
Cool.
the enclosed space, you might see things, dripping down my face. We'll see. It's going to get hot.
Let's hope not.
All the lights.
Keep the sponge close nearby. Yeah,
Exactly.
not busy week for myself too. I have my youngest daughter's birthday today, so we will definitely have to be wrapped up by 3 hours because otherwise you'll be listening to lots of 6 and 7 year old kids screaming outside the office here. So nobody needs that. So we'll make sure we're done by then. So I want to jump right in actually, kind of with my own experience of today's guest. Peter and I have been speaking on the same stages for certainly over a decade. I think it was over 10 years ago I met Peter for the first time at a common friend of ours was running an event in the UK in London, Andy Harrington. Um, and ever since then, our paths have crossed in a variety of ways. But Peter's specialty, I suppose, is in the niche of personal development, human behavior, maximizing life really, and living a fulfilling life. I believe, and Peter can correct me on this later, that you came through the school of working with Tony Robbins directly, and one of his head coaches and head trainers for a period of time, until you broke out on your own. And you have also one of the most viewed TED Talks in the world. I believe that's probably still the case as well. And wrote a fascinating book, The Inside Track, which I one of the few books I've actually listened to more than once on Audible, which was like a really, really interesting insight, which I'm sure we'll get to today at some point as well. It really is a story of um, bouncing back from possibly the lowest low, right? In many ways, it could have finished other people's careers, and I think for yours, you just rose out of it like as a phoenix, like many who didn't know you, I suppose, wouldn't have predicted, but those that did, I suppose, knew it was a new opportunity to use all your tools in the best possible way. So, with all that said, Peter, that hasn't even got to your most recent jaunt. Let's say when you decided you were going to go across the Atlantic in a two-man boat. How long did that take? Let me start with that. That was just incredible.
Yeah, it's a rowing boat of all things. Yeah, no engine, no sail, basically a beefed up canoe. And that took 49 days. I think it was 7 hours and 11 minutes.
Wow.
How'd you do the food thing, Peter? I mean, did you take all that stuff with you? Did you have a kind of a crew kind of standing by, like the reality TV type of things?
All unsupported, which means that if anybody had have touched the boat, would have been disqualified. And there was a time and it was about the first boat we'd seen in a month, uh, came on over the horizon. They'd seen us on the AIS radar, and we come up as an ocean rowing boat, which is kind of like an oddity. It's like the strange animal in the zoo everybody wants to look at. And so they came by, and it was a sailing boat full of like a couple of hundred tourists on the way to the Caribbean. And they got on the radio. We had a really good chat, and they're like, "Hey, do you want some ice cream? Do you want some beer? Do you want some?" I'm like, "Oh my God, it'd be amazing," but we can't. All right, it's like we just we couldn't take anything on. But no, there's no support crew. There's no the nearest safety boat if you get into trouble is anywhere from 4 or 5 days away. It's you're on your own in a big blue wobbly thing.
That is awesome. Did you just fish? Is that what you're doing? Just like fishing over inside the boat, and that's how you.
Fish. No ton of
No.
I mean, someone has to be rowing at all times. So it's 2 hours on, 2 hours recovery, 2 hours rowing, 2 hours recovery. That's 24/7 for just under 2 months. So when you're not rowing, you're exhausted. You're trying to recover. So in the daytime, it's too hot to sleep. You know, you're going over the equator. We're in a carbon fiber boat. The little cabins which you can't even stretch your legs in, essentially mini ovens, to the point where if your legs touch the side, it burns. At nighttime, you get a little bit of reprieve from the heat. There's only 3 downshifts on docks. So if you're lucky, you'll get 90 minutes, meaning that when it's the end of my shift, my oppo comes out, 5-minute briefing on the sea state, the weather state, the navigation, all that kind of stuff. 5 minutes to get in my cabin and get out of my wet gear, address the sore spots, try to get some air to the blisters, charge my headphones, my head torch, battery, and then try to get the cortisol out of your system because you've been rowing hard in a raging sea for 2 hours, and hopefully get enough time to sleep before the alarm goes off 10 minutes before your next 2-hour shift. So if you're lucky and there's no issues that then require you back on deck, which 3 out of 5 sometimes there would be. If you lose the rudder, it needs 2 of you to get back on to lose. If you lose the heading, to fight the wind. Then
My visual image is Popeye. I see like you guys after a month, you get these huge forearms, right, and like all these atrophied legs, like
it was
the
the back.
astronauts.
To be fair,
yeah.
you use the legs more than you realize. Like you drive with the legs, but it's the core, the hip flexors, and the back muscles that when I got off, people saying, "Wow, what's that? Your back?" You're like Dorian Yates, and with scraggly beard, Robinson Crusoe look, sort of covered in. I mean, nothing heals. Yeah, you're covered in bumps and scrapes and cuts and bruises, and the salt water. Just nothing heals. It took me 2 months to be able to straighten my hands again. Having been clamped around the oars for nearly 2 months.
I think that should be our next challenge, Paul. The 49-day, cross the ocean challenge. Who's in? Put it in the chat. Who's in?
Yeah, I'm on easier to finish line. So Peter, what do you think? I don't think I actually spoke to you for any period of timeline before you'd actually taken off. So what were your motivations for doing that before we get into your history, a little bit more about you?
Okay, well, for something like that, you need a big why. If you don't have a why, you're going to quit. Or at least you're going to want to quit, but there's not a lot of places where you can stop the ride or something like that. That's another reason I really fell in love with this as an event, because once you go, there ain't a lot of turning back. So I had 2 primary reasons. The one is I've been teaching self-mastery for best part of 3 decades. And theory doesn't cover the price of admission, certainly not to the high levels of greatness. We talk a good game. Can you walk a good game? And I believe that, especially in personal development or in any kind of business where you're helping people, there's too many Insta-bro idiots out there that are standing next to fake profile pictures of rented Lamborghinis trying to tell people how to get rich by selling them crap on how to get rich. Very few people walk their talk on that. You do, and I aspire to. So when it comes to that kind of event, physical is one thing. I'm in my 50s. I'm in good shape. I should be able to row the Atlantic with enough training. I mean, you get 90-year-olds who can run marathons with the right training. But it's the mental game. You're 1,000 miles offshore. You've not seen another living soul apart from your oppo on board for weeks. The nearest human is in the International Space Station. The nearest land is 5 miles underneath you. You've not eaten for 24 hours because you're seasick. You're exhausted to the point of hallucinating through sleep depth. You're covered in salt blisters. And it's 4 o'clock in the morning. The alarm goes off, and you've got to go out and row backwards in a dark, raging sea for the next 2 hours. That's the point that you can't engineer in a classroom. That's the point that you can't theorize about, or no second takes, no makeup, no. That's the point where your mind is going to give you every excuse as to why you don't want to go to school today. And that's where I want to find out where I'm at. Because if it is, I can't handle this and I want to quit, then fair enough, at least I know. But that means I'm not qualified to teach anymore. I've had a good run, but I can't preach self-mastery if I can't demonstrate self-mastery. And that's one of the things. Where do I sit on my own totem pole? Because it's easy once you're comfortable. I mean, Paul, you and I know what it's like not to be able to afford rent. Yeah, we weren't born with a silver spoon and a ClickFunnels C award. Right? That didn't happen through magic dust. That happened through a lot of effort. But prior to that, prior to the all of the nice cars and the bits and the bobs that go with it, we know what it's like to scrape, to struggle, to make payroll on Friday, to worry where the rent's coming from, to how do we feed the kids, make the school payments, all that stuff. We know what that's going. So when it comes to being able to demonstrate that, now I'm comfortable. I'm at a point in my life where I'm doing well. It's I don't want for anything. I'm financial freedom, all the rest of it. Do I still have what it takes while I'm comfortable to be able to deliver as if I wasn't? And that was part of my big why. Where do I sit on my own totem pole right now? The second reason, probably bigger reason, was I'm all about trying to inspire people, obviously through example. Not that I'd encourage anyone to row the Atlantic, leave that for the idiots like me. But everybody faces their own row. For some people, it's a traumatic divorce or a stage 4 diagnosis or a catastrophic business failure or having a loved one die in your arms. Everybody faces their own row. Lee, my rowing partner, and I, we were lucky. We just got the Atlantic. But if I could use what I was using through my mental tools, resources, experience to get through what I was doing at that level of extremity, how can somebody else use that when their kid comes home from school suffering from bullying, or they get, their boss is overwhelming them at work, or they just face an issue with a diagnosis they weren't expecting, something like that. So my second why was, how do I use this experience to A, validate where I'm at, but B, more importantly, inspire other people through using my tools, techniques that are working in real time here to see if they can transfer them to what other people's equivalent of their role would be.
I got a question for you. How has your life or your viewpoints changed over the past several years as you've been on that journey yourself? I mean, this obviously was your self-testing to see, do I still have it, and am I still fit to teach, like you mentioned? But I'm curious, like, if you stepped outside of yourself for a second, what has been the evolution that you've seen, and are there any like keen takeaways that you can share with us?
I think over the last probably several years, not as much. Certainly, if you extrapolate that out from the early days of being very ego-driven, driven by the need for significance, trying to prove to the world that I'm good enough, thinking that it cares, trying to avoid the fear that I'm not enough, all of that stuff. Big turning point was when I started shifting my driving knees from significance to growth and contribution. That was a big turning point for me. And it's really all about emotional maturity. Nobody's born enlightened. Buddha wasn't born enlightened. He was born Prince Siddhartha. 3-year-olds don't give lessons on social economics. There's a reason for that. We have to evolve. But there's a huge difference between emotional maturity and physical maturity. There's a lot of old people running around in some pretty teenage mindsets when it comes to emotional maturity. Sure. So for me, some of the demarcations along that journey of emotional maturity was when I finally woke up to the realization that life was a growth-centric experience, not a comfort-centric experience. When I finally realized that challenges are part of the inherent design of the game in Earth School. We're here to learn so that we can give more of who we are to the world. As soon as we start focusing on what we can take rather than what we can give, we get feedback, whether that's more drama, whether that's not as fulfilling relationships. There's a lot of feedback out there that comes back by design. So testing myself on the Atlantic wasn't a one-off thing. It was what I call a graduation event. And graduation events are built into the fabric of our existence in this physical world by design, just like they're built into school by design. And why did we invent schools? We're in one. It's a fractal expression. It was always going to be in our nature. So if I go to school, I'm going to get an exam, not to punish me, to see if I can demonstrate what I've been learning. Am I picking it up? Am I on track? And to benchmark me if I'm in the right class. Because if I pass year 8, I don't say, great, I'm the smartest kid in year 8. I want to stay here and feel significant. No, you go to year 9. Are the questions harder? Yeah, they're meant to be. So if we don't choose our own tests, they're often chosen for us. And that was off the back of another graduation event I had a few years prior to that, where I was thrown into prison as a criminal. And coming out of that graduation event, I was like, well, you know something? The Olympics is every 4 years. Maybe if I choose the next one on my own terms, it'll be it won't be as much of a surprise. So yeah, how has it shifted me? How have I evolved? You get smarter, you get wiser, and you don't sweat the small stuff as much. And everything's a contrast frame. A few months after I rode the Atlantic, I went and ran a marathon at the North Pole, as you do. And I was with a bunch of elite runners. Somebody was there 1,000th and something marathon. Others had ran marathons at Everest and all this kind of stuff. I'm a plodder. But we were running at the North Pole, geographic North Pole, 90-0. And there's no land there, so you're running on sea ice. Now what happens is the sun melts the top layer of the water on the ice. And so certain parts of the course, probably about a third, you're at least 4 or 5 inches under water. This is frozen, 0-degree kind of water. So it's about 6 hours to run it because you're running through slush. In some parts, it's tough. And most people that had, nearly all the runners said it was the hardest marathon they'd ever ran, because you've got to basically run with your feet in ice water for 6 hours. Most people won't want to sit down with their feet in ice water for 6 hours. Right? But compared to just finishing the Atlantic, 6 hours was 3 of my 2-hour rowing shifts. I just did 500 back to back, some of them in storms with 30-foot waves. It was like I could have ran the North Pole Marathon on my hands and knees backwards and not complained. So it's a contrast frame. Doing things at certain levels, the contrast frame. You have somebody come out of a narcissistic relationship where they've been belittled and emotionally abused for 3 years, and they get into a relationship with an average person. They think the guy's amazing. Everything's a contrast. So you can use contrast frames to work for you or against you. I encourage people, when you do graduation events, when you do set things up, they're really good contrast frames so that you're not going to sweat the small stuff. Somebody that's got through cancer isn't worried about when they get flu. It's all about perspective. How did I choose my partner? He actually chose me. I knew about this race, this world's toughest row, for many years. I was speaking at the, I was a delegate at the International Federation of Professional Speakers convention in Singapore in 2004. So 22 years ago. And a guy was giving a talk on this crazy thing he did, rowing across the Atlantic. And I listened, I'm like, wow, you've got to have a screw loose for that kind of stuff. There is no way. I just ran the Marathon des Sables, which is a marathon a day back to back for 7 days across the Sahara. Day 4 was a double marathon. It was the toughest foot race in the world at that point. But rowing the Atlantic for 2 months, are you kidding me? Like, no way. So I then did one of my TED Talks in Oporto in 2013, I believe. About 11 years later, so 9 years later. And one of the guys was giving a TED Talk on the fact he'd rowed the Atlantic on this event. So I was very familiar with it. I also knew with absolute certainty that I would never, ever, ever do it. And then I get a text message in 2021 from my best friend, childhood friend. He's actually coming over in a few days. And saying, hey, Pete, guess what we're doing in 2024? I'm like, what? And he sends me a text message with a link to the race. I send him a message back I can't repeat because there may be children listening. And he was like, oh, oh, come on, it'll be fun. I'm like, Lee, I know the race and I know why I wouldn't do it. He said, well, look, they leave from La Gomera, which is the next island to my island in Tenerife. I live in Tenerife. And the race goes every year from La Gomera, the next island, to Tenerife. And it's the same route that Columbus took. Columbus left before he hit the New World from La Gomera. It was his last stop in the western side. Sorry, over here, Europe, before he hit America. And so they traced that route, ending up in Antigua, 5,000 kilometers, 3,000 miles. So he says, look, can I come and stay at your place for a couple of days? Because I want to then go over to La Gomera and watch this year's race leave. I'm like, do what you want, buddy. I'm out of here. I'm actually going over to Necker. I'm with Richard Branson on Necker. So, yeah, my place is empty. Use it and then bounce over to La Gomera. Not a problem. So I've been saved. What happened? 2 days before I'm due to go to Necker, I get a call from the organizer, a friend of mine, says, Pete, I'm ever so sorry. I've been speaking to Branson's security team. They're not going to let you on the island. Like, why? Well, you went to Pentonville. I'm like, I was a non-criminal. Listen, he said, I've been arguing your case for the last 30 minutes. They won't budge. So sorry. Refunding my money. Lost the flights, but, whatever. So I was here at my home when Lee came over, and of course he's here. We're going to La Gomera together. So I sit with him in the future rowers brief, and I, see all the other teams getting ready and wave them off. And he's like, well, what do you think? Oh, crap. We're doing it, aren't we? He knew if he got me there. And I look at that and I look at Leo. I'm here to serve. I'm here to inspire. That happens to be the theme of my movie that I'm starring in. That's my mission, my purpose at this part of my life. That seems to be very congruent. So it was always going to happen. I think I inspired a lot more people rowing the Atlantic than I would have been hobnobbing on Necker with Branson. So the universe was always going to move things around in a way that aligned with where can I serve the most? As much as like I would have loved to have gone to Necker, it was a childhood dream, from the age of, as a teenager. But what's really more important? Let's go prove yourself that you're still qualified to teach. Let's go inspire people. We had tens of thousands of people watching the crossing. We were the first team to ever take a Starlink mini. So we video diaried the whole thing. We were uploading different videos each day on the lessons and how I was coping with it and understanding how to deal with the extreme. But yeah, that's to that day, I think the greatest achievement was that Lee, my best friend, isn't into personal development. He was a Royal Marine for 22 years. He's a warrior. He's there. You show him a problem. He's trained to go through it, attack, challenge, figure it out. Amazing guy. But never done a personal development seminar. And he's not a graduate of my Elite Mentorship Forum. And I said to my students, I said, the biggest challenge I've got isn't the waves. It's see if I'm still going to be friends with Lee in Antigua. Because the whole race isn't worth me losing my childhood friendship over. And what was fascinating was that, and by the way, Lee got knocked out twice on the race, right? While he was rowing on his shift, rogue wave, slammed him against, injured, couldn't row. I rowed solo for a week as part of the 2 months. And, when we got to the end, closer now than we've ever been. You go through that kind of thing with each other. It can be a bonding experience or a separating experience. And that was in end of January 29th, we landed in Antigua. We left December the 11th. In April, all of the teams get back together in London for the award ceremony. Because as soon as you leave La Gomera, you don't see each other again. You don't see another boat on different strategies, different routes. There's 4-man teams, so they row faster because there's 2 people rowing at any one time, that kind of stuff. So I was speaking in Antalya in Turkey, so I couldn't make it. So Lee went to the awards dinner. And he came back and he says, Pete, you're never going to guess what. He says, virtually every single team, there was 40 teams in the year that we did it in 2024-25. Virtually every single team was no longer a team.
Wow.
At least one of the members of virtually every team weren't there. And if they were going to be there, the other members said they wouldn't have gone. Almost everybody fell out. And he said, everyone thought we had because you weren't there. Until I told him, no, he just couldn't make it on schedule. And that was probably one of my biggest wins of crossing the Atlantic, was being closer to Lee now than I was when I started, even though we've been friends since we were kids. So that really just shows you again where, you know, human behavior, you've got such an emotional cauldron, almost like a, a pestle of, yeah, of being ground down, where the smallest little thing could spark a flash. Did we not have an argument? It was rare. I think it was 2 or 3 times we disagreed. And you're talking about when your life's at stake. And when I had to change the rudder under the boat, where waves snapped our rudder, we lost 2 oars. These are carbon fiber, 6 times stronger than steel, snap like toothpicks. I mean, the Atlantic's no joke. Yeah, I was just glad my shin wasn't in the way. Right? Yeah, and I had to get under the boat at one point, and Lee was in the cabin trying to figure out how to get the spare rudder up, and I'm being lifted out of the ocean 2 feet, slammed underneath. It was a raging sea. I've got no strength left. I'm swallowing seawater. It's the closest I've ever come to drowning. And you know, you've got situations where, I remember I recorded a video at the time to my partner just before I went in saying, listen, if you find this video, but you don't find me, you know, I love you. It was my choice. Don't think I argued with Lee and he hit me over the head and threw me over the side. Right? It's my choice. I've got to go in the sea. It's no joke right now. The sea's raging, but we've got to repair the rudder. There's no other way. And yeah, Lee's already had concussion. He's not going under. It's my job. I'm doing it. I think I'll be okay. But just in case, I left my phone in the cabin. And that was one of the hardest things closest I've ever come to dying. And you know, you go through things like that, and it's as I say, a graduation event. You don't sweat the small stuff as much after that. You appreciate little things. Everything else pales in comparison. You know, it was General Patton that said, compared to war, most people's troubles shrink in insignificance. And it's always great to have, looking back in our life, guys, and certainly anybody listening now, we tend to complain a lot about the hardships. Almost every single thing that we have been grateful for in our life, we could probably trace back to an event that was a challenge, a negative, or a hardship. Thinking, well, thank goodness that happened, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this now. Now, the irony was the year after us, last year, the one that's just gone, they had no storms, easy crossing, uneventful. Whereas that's kind of what Lee and I were hoping for. But ultimately, all of the stories that I share with people about that inspire them the most came from the challenges, the concussions, the near drowning, the snapped oars, the broken rudder, all of that stuff, the adversity. Why? If there's one lesson I'd leave you with out of this whole story, stress plus courage equals miracles. Stress plus resistance equals, decline and drama.
Peter, did you have anything like Apollo syndrome afterwards, where, you know, like the first astronauts to the moon, where everything just paled in comparison, like to that point? I mean, yes, of course, you've the contrast frame of nothing seems as difficult because I did this, but also, did life lose its edge a little bit for you, or lose its spark a little bit? You wake up in the morning and you're just going to go walk the dogs or whatever it is.
Not so much. I think if you're in love with life anyway, and you're grateful for things as a practice. I mean, gratitude and surrender was what got me across the Atlantic, not fighting. And my most common playlist on my headphones was my meditation playlist, while I was going across the Atlantic. So coming back, there's definitely an adjustment in terms of, it took 3 days for the world to stop moving. My vestibular was so overactive because we're doing this all the time that I remember sitting on the edge of the bed the first morning thinking that Antigua had an earthquake. And that was that, but no, everything was fine. But it's, life happens. You've still got stuff to go back to and businesses to run and emails to answer and podcasts to do and things. So you fit back in quite easily. I think there was more of a sense of pride than a sense of, oh God, well, what next? I wasn't looking to top anything from there. I mean, the North Pole Marathon was already booked. So there wasn't really a come down. I think there was a sense of appreciation, sense of awe, sense of wonder, sense of self-pride. Not pride as in ego, but proud of the fact that I'd done it, because it was a test. So no, I can see how some people do that. It's almost like the Brooks was here syndrome out of Shawshank. You know, you spend so much time in prison, you come out, you're institutionalized, you can't handle the real world, and it's easier to cash in your chips.
Mhm.
But yeah, for me, it was easy to get back. I missed my dogs like mad. You know, people say, well, what about Nadia, your partner? I'm like, well, I spoke to her every day on the sat phone. She knew where I was, and I had a picture of her and the dogs in my cabin. But I miss my dogs. You know, dogs are unconditional love. Love them to bits. You know, I just wanted to go home, see my dogs, and be in my home, and sleep in a bed that didn't move, that I could stretch my legs in, that wasn't going to end up staring at the ceiling because we'd just been slammed by a wave. Yeah. So no, there was no kind of come down. Um, it took me probably 2 months physically to recover. You know, I lost 9 kilos, and yeah, the I say I look like Robinson Crusoe. I had a big bushy beard coming off. I mean, I honestly, I look like Tom Hanks had a castaway. It was it was insane. But no, you get back into life pretty much if you've got purpose. If you come out of that and you don't have purpose, like anything, you're going to be kind of, to quote Zig, a wandering generality rather than a meaningful specific. But I've tried very hard to be a meaningful specific in my life, so it was easy to pick that back up.
You have 40 plus days in your own head. Did you discover anything, or did you have any big insights that you had? Because I mean, I can imagine there's people that go to these meditation retreats and they're like walking meditation. They literally don't see anybody. There's silence. There's different types of things. There's dark room retreats, for people to really get inside their space and let their mind expand. How did your mind expand through that experience, or did you all of a sudden have the awakening in certain parts of your
Yeah, good question.
your life?
Transcendental experience or
Yeah.
out of body experience, I'd imagine, if you're ever going to have it.
Well, one of the things to remember is that there's a lot going on. Yeah, you've got two people on something that's literally just a bit bigger than a beefed up canoe. I'm sitting 6 inches off the water. When I'm rowing, you have to be so focused. Course over ground, wave direction, wind state. I mean, it's mentally taxing. I thought I'd have a lot of time. I thought finally I'll learn Spanish. And I had this beautiful grandiosity, sort of vision of getting off the boat and speaking to my girlfriend in Spanish, to say, thank you and how much I loved her and everything. Wasn't going to happen. I mean, you think you'd have time to think? You don't. You had time to, I tried putting on the Duolingo thing, all the rest of it. I can't even, you don't have the mental capacity. When you're not rowing, you're either doing boat maintenance, solar panel maintenance, navigation, water maker stuff, or you're just so exhausted you can't even speak. So there was, let alone try to put your focus on something. You just want to try to relax or dress wounds or sore spots or whatever. So there's just, it's relentless. There's no downtime. Now, there were certain times when the sea was calm, and especially at night. It was quiet. The waves were calm. The moon was up. The stars were incredible. And you're just there in awe. Those moments were magic moments. Those moments you're like, wow, I'm never going to have this experience again. And so I want to savor this. I want to be in that moment. Gratitude was overwhelming at that point. In terms of aha, I think one of the adjustment things that surprised me was after about 7 days, up to 7 days, the body is adjusting like mad. It is protesting loudly. You're sleeping 90 minutes and then you're awake for 2.5 hours, nonstop 24/7. And you're learning on the go. And then when the first storm hit after 4 days and we hit 11-meter waves, that scared the crap out of me. Because you can't train for something like that. You don't go out and train in a 4/7. Right? It's like, and these towering hundreds of tons of water, like 11 meters, 5-6 stories tall, above you, that anyone could crash and snap the boat in half if you get rolled. It was terrifying. And they came every 5 seconds for 4 days and nights. And it was a very interesting time of adjustment that first week. But I noticed something interesting is that after about a week, the body just stopped protesting. And what it did, it started just to accept. Okay, you're going to get up in another 2 hours and do it again. Okay, not going to be eating and resting the way you normally are. Okay, let's adjust. And it made me realize that a comfort zone isn't really a comfort zone. It's a familiarity zone. And that we are so much more capable of what we are, what we can do than we give ourselves credit for. We're here to grow and contribute. And that's why I said the greatest day in a human being's life is when they come to the realization or wake up to the fact we're in a growth-centric experience, not a comfort-centric experience. And if you look at that, there's human beings. Take the word human being, 2 words. We are the perfect encapsulation of physical and non-physical in one beautiful package. Human relates to the body, relates to physical. Put a human in a box. Being, non-physical. And the essence of what makes you you is non-physical. If I take George, and what makes George George? It's not his body. He's got a different body now than 25 years ago, and he's going to have a different body in 25 years from now. We don't get to vote on that. It's called the rule set. But what makes you you? It's the invisible. It's the non-physical. It's your personality, your values, your goals, your dreams, your sense of humor, your character, right? All of that creates something that we know as George. And if we take that out of George and go put it in Paul, George simply now has a different body. So when you look at human being, the human aspect, if we identify more as human than as being, let's say more body rather than more consciousness, or if you don't like the word consciousness, awareness. The body comes wired as part of the rule set with a nervous system that is designed to seek comfort. Part of the rules. Very useful if you're standing too close to a fire. Walking on sharp stones. But if we identify with the body and think that life is comfort-centric, we ignore the bigger part of who we are, which is non-physical. And the non-physical part of us is not wired for comfort, it's wired for growth. So which part of you are identifying with you most? You think you're your body? You think Jesus thought himself as his body? Or Muhammad? Krishna? Or Buddha? No. They knew they were bigger than that. So if you identify more as consciousness rather than the physical meat suit we're running around in, if you identify as the car instead of the driver, then you're going to have a tough time creating the life you want, because you're going to be overridden in terms of decision priority through your nervous system, which is seeking comfort. And go try seeking a comfort-centric life and see what happens. Life is going to put you on the rumble strip, give you some feedback. It's not where we're heading. You're here to grow. Why? So that we can give more back, more of who we are. So when you realize, we star in a movie of our life, what does that entail? It entails us being able to become better actors on how do I encapsulate that. And I normally share this after 3 days of framing people around the right kind of learning and seminars, but you guys and your audience are a smart tribe. What does emotional maturity look like? What are we really here to do? We're here to grow up. What does that look like? Simple. The most shortest phrase I could ever sum up your life's purpose in. Individually expressed through however you and your movie and your preferences and everything else, but ultimately the undercurrent of all of it, how do we choose love over fear in ever more challenging circumstances? What would love do versus what am I responding to out of ego, fear, self-preservation, self-interest? What are we here to learn how to do? Every spiritual master on the planet taught the same thing. You're here to learn how to love. You're here to learn how to become bigger than you so that you can contribute more back into the game than you're taking out. If we can do that, then I say that's a life well lived.
So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. You've been through some interesting things too, as far as like how can you channel that love into actually turning into something dynamic and creative and exceptional.
Yeah, do you know what keeps echoing through for me as you speak on the topic, Peter, is, and for a moment I'd forgotten the connection, but Rory Kilmartin, and when he talks about the game of life and the graduation events, and George and I actually have this podcast in a strange way, was kind of set up through Rory Kilmartin in an odd series of circumstances. But I mean, Rory's entire work is based around that, right? It's that you either think that every single person you've ever met needs to go and meet a psychiatrist to make your world better, or you realize you're the person that needs to maybe sit down first and look in the mirror. Um, and I mean, I've definitely come to appreciate that more over the years. It's you see how naturally just when older, but people get older, wiser, and why they become our elders. It's like experience and age has an incredible way of teaching you, regardless if you're ready to be taught. The message eventually seems to get in. I forget who said it to me years ago, but they said, "Have you ever been at a funeral where anybody over 70 is losing their mind, emotionally, whether they just lost a partner or their child or whatever it was?" They're very stoic. They've been there. They've seen this before. It's come and gone. The perceived loss is going to be replaced with an unseen gain, etc. But you just don't see that at the time when you're at a certain age. But I think the way that you go and test yourself in these extraordinary circumstances, um, it, is there more to it, Peter? Are you trying to fast track to something else? I know you also are a big believer in David Hawkins's work at the scale of consciousness. Do you see an overlap here? And a more specific question: do you take your consciousness measurements after doing something like this, and does it bring you up that scale of consciousness? I wonder, after going through an experience like that.
Interesting question. I'm obviously very familiar with Hawkins' scale. I've been asked many, many times, where do I see myself? The answer is the same: zero interest. The only interest I have is putting one foot in front of the other and trying to do it better than I did yesterday, despite being in the slow learning club that I've been blessed to be in for many, many years. So do things like that change you? Of course they do. But it's all down to decision and free will. And some people, a divorce is, or the loss of a loved one is traumatic and they never get over it. For others, it's a sense of a new chapter in their life. They become inspired to go and live. Some people, cancer is the enemy. For some people, cancer is the messenger. So, for me, I think that the culmination of where I am is always going to be based upon the experiences you've had. That's just being real. But do I aspire to try to fast track myself? I'm just here to put one foot in front of the other as best I can and tune in. When I went to La Gomera with Lee, promising Nadia that no matter what would happen, I wouldn't do this. And I sat there and I looked at it, and then it hit me as to why I wasn't in NECA and why. I'm like, is it going to be tough? You bet your ass it's going to be tough. Is it going to be tough physically, mentally, emotionally, everything? Most extreme endurance event nothing comes close. The toughest sporting event on TV is probably the Tour de France. 8 hours a day cycling, grueling in the Pyrenees, 2 rest days. They're still sleeping 8 hours a night. Now, this is 2 hours on, 2 hours off for nearly 2 months. It's like there is, So I knew it was going to be tough, but I tuned in. What's my truth? Not what's my ego. What's my truth? Is there going to be fear? Of course there is. I can address that. That's one thing. But is it my truth to do this? Am I avoiding it for reasons that I need to dig deeper in to be able to have a look and process through? Are there unprocessed fears here that are coming up that I need to look at? Yeah. And if the answer was, this isn't my truth, I'd have had no problems making that answer. But I tuned in. I tell people to have like a high signal to noise ratio. And signal being heart or gut and noise being mind. And it was a yes. And so, where does that leave me on the map of consciousness? I don't know. Probably, with more experience. But I just try to be more loving and less fearful. Am I perfect? Hell no. And Nadia calls me the bulldozer. I come in, I leave a wake of stuff behind me that I'm not as elegant as I need to be, but we all have our own aspects. I'm very much a visionary. I'm a big picture guy. I don't do detail very well. I I usually need detail people to mop up the mess after me. And that's not good when you need to have detail when, yeah, if you leave your cabin door off the latch and a wave comes, you're done. Right? If you forget to clip on when you leave your cabin and you get thrown off the boat, you're done. And because the wind moves the boat faster than you can swim against the surface area, and very soon you can't even see the boat apart from occasionally if you're at the top of a wave and that happens to be at the top of a wave at the same time. So you lose the sense of direction. And if you go overboard and you're not clipped on, it's not going to be long before the only thing that's happening is you see your friend disappear over the horizon. So you've got to have a presence of mind. And there was actually twice on the trip where I was that exhausted. I got out. It was usually a night shift. And it was 20 minutes rowing before I realized I hadn't clipped on. And that wakes you up a little. Or, as I say, if it's that hot, especially in the day, you really want to open the cabin door to get some air in. There's not enough room for two of you on deck. But if you do that and a wave comes, if the boat capsizes, because you've got two airtight cabins, it'll pop back up. It'll self-right. But if one of those cabins is opens and fills with water, apart from the fact with your electronics and stuff, your navigation, everything else, the boat won't self-right because now it's bottom heavy. So you're done. And there's been several rescues that have had to happen as a result of that. The year before there was 4 Navy SEALs, U.S. Navy SEAls that did the race. And they had a rogue wave. They said their hatch was shut, but a rogue wave smashed their lock and flooded the cabin. Needed to be picked up by a cargo ship en route to Canada 16 hours later out of their life raft. So attention to detail is something that you really need to. You wing it in your 20s. But as you get older, you do need to pay a little bit more attention to some of the stuff you shouldn't be getting, you can't get away with, certainly when it comes to health as well.
No, great. A question that came to mind there now when you talked about your partner. I've certainly received comments like this over the years about, God, you must be very selfish in these pursuits. Right? You really are kind of putting yourself above anybody else's needs. I'm sure you've had people say that, or maybe touched on it, maybe through humor, but actually genuinely meant it. What are your thoughts on things like that when you do take on these huge personal challenges that do involve an element of sacrifice for those around you, whether family or extended family, that they from their values view that act as selfish?
It's an interesting perspective, one that I think has its grounding more in a display of their selfishness than yours. But when it comes to understanding what I said earlier, my responsibility is to walk my truth. I have no right to impose my truth on anybody else, and nor would I ever insist on anybody else rowing the Atlantic. But nobody gets to tell me what to do in my movie, and I need to look at, as long as nobody else is less than as a result of that. Of course, if I was to go, Nadia is sitting here, worried every night if I'm going to be alive. I get that. But it's the same as if it's part of my mission, which it was, and it's tied in, not for ego, not because I want to show off a medal. I didn't get a medal, but not any of that stuff. Then you could say that's a slightly different perspective. But if you have the wife of a soldier and the soldier has to go to war, why? Because that's what soldiers do. And she's begging him not to leave because there's a chance he could get killed. And he's like, I have to go. It's my duty to go. This is what I train for. This is what I do. But I don't want you to go. And she breaks down and cries. If that soldier gets to the door, turns around and says, you know something, honey? I'm not going to go. She would never trust him again. Because there's an element that is required for you to be able to step up out of your comfort zone to walk what's your truth and your mission. Whilst you may have short-term reprieve in that point from the fear of losing him in battle, a guy compromising his own truth for somebody else's insecurities, even if that's put across under the guise of, oh, you're selfish, is not somebody who's walking their truth. And so if it imposes, and it often does. I mean, Paul, you know as well as I do, the life of a wife of an entrepreneur is a different life. Now, I'm not saying wives can't be entrepreneurs. There's, as many amazing women entrepreneurs there are, but in our context, Natty's not an entrepreneur. I am. What does that mean? That means that next week we could lose our home, not be able to afford dog food. There is no certainty. There is a level of requiring to stand in the face of uncertainty and trust that we can work our magic as providers and go out against the odds as we do, fight the battle, eat last, and hopefully there's enough jam on the table to spread on the bread. And so, is that selfish? Are you kidding me? No. What's selfish is you expecting somebody else to fit your pictures because of whatever imposition you have on what you think they should do in order to fit your needs in your script. Probably answers your question.
Okay, well, that's been fascinating. Let's move to the book, if you don't mind, Peter, because to be fair, if you hadn't been across the Atlantic, we probably would have started there. The Atlantic certainly trumps probably. Well, actually, for most people, that would probably, they wouldn't even have a comparison to anything else in their life, whether they climbed Everest multiple times or not. They would still say, no, that transatlantic crossing was something that cannot be compared to in terms of trauma, personal challenge that you took on. But I think when you start to talk about this, for me, this would be much more of a fear for me personally than I would happily take on the Atlantic solo rather than go to jail. I mean, that's how deeply worrying or how much of a fear that is for me, is ever having to do that, I suppose, from watching Shawshank, etc. as a kid, or Oz on HBO years later, because there was never an Irish gang, so I wasn't sure where I was going to fit in. But talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind, because that's just an incredible story.
Yeah, I didn't see that one coming. And just a little bit of context and background as quick as I can. In 2015, I was doing business with multiple offices of Hewlett-Packard around the Middle East. I was living in Dubai, came back to England, and I get a knock at the door from Mishcon de Reya, which is Princess Diana's divorce lawyers, ruthless $100 million firm representing the $140 billion HP, suing me for $17 million of contract dispute. I'm like, what? Anyway, I bought $12.5 million worth of goods. I paid for them in full, and then I'd resold them at a small margin. And they said, we didn't give you permission to resell it. So therefore, some of the people that had bought it cheaper from me than they could have done through HP. And they sued me for the difference between the $12.5 million and the $30 million worth of retail. All right. I'm like, you're having a laugh. That doesn't work. Show me one contract I signed where it says I couldn't sell it. The only contract terms were I don't receive title to the goods until I pay for them. Standard stuff. I paid $12.5 million in full. If I want to set fire to them, give them away, go to Vegas and put it on 36 Black, it's my decision. I'm not going to get bullied just because one of your distributors bought something off me and you're upset about it because you lost out based on their actions. I've done nothing wrong. So I felt it was bullying, and it was. They're just trying to scare me, because they came and said, listen, give us $100 grand, we'll make it all go away. I'm like, oh, I get it. Just because you got bigger muscles in the financial playground, you want to bully me. I ain't standing for it. No, I've done nothing wrong. Take me to court. I'm happy to stand up. So they didn't want to go to court. And by the way, it never did get to court. Now, I know it wouldn't stack up in court. But in order to put pressure on me to try to settle and give them some money, because they knew it was going to cost a couple of $100 grand to defend it in the high court. So be smart and give us $100 grand. Right? Which, in all fairness, I should have been smart and given them $100 grand. But my ego got involved. I'm like, no, this is just wrong. It's all bullshit. So in order to put pressure on me, they issued a contempt of court application as part of it. Civil matter. Yeah, it's litigation. It's no criminal. And saying that I breached a freezing order because they'd froze all my accounts. They're trying to put all this pressure on me. I hadn't. I looked at it. I looked at what they'd done. It was clever. But I thought a judge would laugh that out of court and see through it in 5 minutes. I learned a valuable lesson. And who can tell the best stories and present the best stuff? And court's not about truth. You think that you're in Disneyland. It's who can tell their version of the facts with the right level of context to support your version. It's about how do we twist context to present content in a light that supports our story. That's essentially. You practice something called verisimilitude. So it's an English word that means the appearance of truth. Right? So, and think about it. Yeah, there is very few, even in America, you have 9 Supreme Court judges, highest court in the land. It's very rare it's a unanimous decision. Meaning that even though the law is written in black and white, 9 of the most senior judges in the entire Western world can't even agree. You get the idea. It's subjective. If you've got good subjective storytellers, then yeah, you tend to come out on top. I didn't. I thought truth was a higher value. Anyway, sent me down for 6 months. Actually, I got an 18-month sentence as a civil prisoner. Never been accused of a crime, never been found guilty, still no criminal record. And as a civil prisoner, you do an automatic half. So I was going to do 9 months. I actually appealed. They dropped it to 12 months. I served 6. But I served that in Pentonville, which is statistically the most violent prison in Europe. Blood on the floor is a daily occurrence. Attempted murders are weekly. Some guy just got stabbed to death 2 days before I got there. It was all over the papers. It's not a joke. Yeah, this is not a Camp Cupcake holiday program. So one of the things to understand is that you can never change what's already happened, and arguing about that is futile. Resistance to what is the biggest waste of energy and resources and hope that anyone could ever have. If the milk is spilt on your brand new carpet, it may piss you off, but getting depressed and taking Prozac ain't going to put it back in the bottle. So when you free up the energy of resistance to what is and move that to acceptance, moving up to Hawkins's map, it's a big distinction. Right? Acceptance is almost as big a jump in terms of a demarcation on Hawkins' map as courage. Acceptance is the next big one. Why? Because you drop resistance. So you practice conscious non-resistance, not resignation. Right? That's apathy, which leads to victimhood. We're talking about, okay, it is what it is. What do I do next? And you free up that energy of resistance and channel it into the next best move. So, okay, let's have a think about this. This is an outlier. 1,000,000 to 1 didn't see this coming, but the universe has just found the only way in English law that I could be smuggled into prison without ever being charged of a crime, brought out again 6 months later without even having a criminal record. I mean, for a start, freaking genius. Why would it do that? Because I've been teaching self-mastery and personal growth the last quarter of a century at that point. But maybe the real people that I could help never listen to podcasts like this. Maybe the real people that I could help to make the biggest difference for are the ones that societies have forgotten. The ones that don't have the ability or have come across or had the good fortune like you and I have, guys, of having mentors or stuff that we've learned from to be able to try to be successful. So if they want to smuggle me in there as an undercover Jedi, as a secret agent of change, what a freaking exciting project that is. Let's play. And that's the attitude I went in with. It's like, boom, I'm clearly on a mission. And as a result of, as I said earlier, having purpose, it transformed the entire experience into one of the most incredible, inspiring adventures I've ever had the privilege of living. And was it tough? The Atlantic was tough. Running a marathon's tough. Why do people do it voluntarily? So they get a medal at the end and can feel proud of themselves. So they can raise the bar. So that they can push past their comfort zone of what they thought was capable and set a new standard, whatever it may be. So was it tough? Yeah, there were times very tough. Times I cried. Times I thought I'd lost it. Right, I had lost everything. I find myself moving from 50 staff and 6 figures a month in doing well in business, helping hundreds of people, to virtually 0 staff, hundreds of thousands of dollars, pounds in legal debt, no credit rating. You couldn't have gone any lower. And locked in a little cage for 23 plus hours a day amongst, some of the most colorful characters you could probably imagine. And of course, did I get scared? No, I got excited. I went to work. And, as you know, I said earlier, you said I was an experienced trainer for Tony Robbins. I was never a head trainer or head coach or anything like that, but I was an experienced trainer. Spent 15 years in the Robbins Research Organization. And I'll tell you, I had a skill set. psychotherapeutic intervention, for example. And I'll also say, and I'm half tongue in cheek, but half pretty much serious. You could ask any other trainer of my experience in Tony events for this. I met a lot more crazies in Tony Robbins seminars than I did in prison. All right. So I had a decent enough skill set to work with some of the people that, wanted work. And I went to work. Long story short, I ended up getting a lot of the prisoners off drugs. I was stopping suicides. I redesigned the intake system to help reduce violence between the wings for mental adjustment. It's now being used in prisons all over the world. I won a national award for the work that I did in there, and hopefully left a little thumbprint on people in the system in a way that is still doing good.
Peter, you've probably told that story, or at least relayed some of your experience about this dozens, if not hundreds of times to people, but what haven't you told anyone yet? What's one thing that you've either been too afraid to tell people or you just haven't said for some reason?
It's an interesting question, because going through it, I was a very open book, because I wasn't of the mindset I was sharing this with everyone. I was sharing it with my students. And I wanted to use this as a case study for them. I wanted them to come along. And if I'm in here and I'm in here for a reason, and I'm using what I want to use on myself. And I was very open about the times that I cried, the times I got depressed, the times I questioned whether or not I was ever going to teach again, or whether it would work, or if I was making a difference. All of the techniques that I was using on me as well as others to try to stay on point. There wasn't even information that was shared to me in confidence that I say I wouldn't be able to share. I say it was a very open book. There were other times, I'm trying to think that I would have tried to keep quiet. I don't think there isn't anything that I've not been open about, and I think there's a reason for that. In fact, when I came out, I remember going to the market in my hometown in Leicester to buy fruit, because I used to juice every day. So every week I would go and buy a big load of fruit from the same people on the market. It was the Lineker store, Gary Lineker's family. And they hadn't seen me for 6 months. And then, oh God, where you been? And there's two ways you can come out of this. One is to try to bury it, hope people don't notice, be embarrassed. That was never going to happen. That's inauthentic. The other way is to lead with it. I was like, oh wow, where you not seen you for a while? You better say, yeah, I've been in prison. Like, what? I'm like, yeah, just his 6 months in Pentonville of all places. Oh my God. Yeah, it's a pattern interrupt for a start. Yeah, people say to me, oh, what's your book about? I'm like, oh, it's the 11 letters I wrote from prison. Well, it's almost fun to be able to see the reactions. But it's been very open, very forthright. Why? Because there was a lot of lessons there. I still don't think I did anything wrong, in all fairness. What I did do wrong, and again, I detail this in the book. I allowed my ego and my contempt for what I thought Hewlett-Packard were doing to translate into what the judge thought was contempt for the court. Because I went in there to prove them wrong, rather than what I should have done is go in and say, under the way that they've shown that they think that I have breached the freezing order, or breached the court order in certain terms and conditions. I'm very sorry if that's how it's come across. It's not my intention. I didn't think I had one. There was no really coming across as contrite. There was no apology. I was there to argue the toss against those bastards that were trying to pull legal shenanigans to make me look bad. Bastards, right? And it was that energy of my ego that was probably my biggest downfall in court. Now, if you look at that through one lens, okay. Look at that through a higher lens. I had to be there. If I'd have represented myself rather than my barrister, who was, qualified from the legal school in mutism, didn't ask any questions. It was easily in cahoots with HP, and there's been many instances I've seen, and public, people have now declared that HP pay off a lot of different opposite lawyers. And I'm on legal aid. I've got a state-appointed attorney, as you'd call it in America. They spent $250,000 just on the hearing. So look at it from a higher perspective. If I'd have defended myself or represented myself, I'd have most likely walked. So I'd done nothing wrong and I knew how to frame it and argue it, but I wasn't allowed to speak. Only be cross-examined by their silk, which is higher than a Queen's Counsel, higher than a QC. And every parent knows that a 5-year-old can make you look stupid by asking the right questions. So if I'd have represented myself, I know very easily I'd have destroyed their argument. But if that had have happened, chances are, driving home, I'd have probably clipped some poor cyclist off into a hedge and ended up in prison that way. The universe had to get me in order for me to have that experience. That I'm 1,000% convinced of.
But you didn't choose that test. Meaning, like to our discussion earlier, you said if you don't choose your test, then life will choose it for you.
Right.
I'm wondering, like, because I'm listening to the story and I'm thinking, if I was in your shoes, I would be so angry throughout the entire process at the injustice, the process, and to the point of saying and starting to plan the destruction of everyone who was involved in this when I got out. You know what I'm saying? Like, in detail. I'm talking about manifestos in my mind.
That's why the Batman t-shirt is on, George.
I'm just saying, yeah, exactly. I had to pick this t-shirt this morning to Peter's, point, right? It was going to end up on me at one point in time for this podcast. But like going through this, I'm thinking to myself, man, I don't know if I could have put myself in that higher place to say, you know what? I'm okay with this. I'm going to just, I'm going to Gandhi out for a minute and I'm going to be like, I was supposed to be here anyway. I'm just trying to figure out how did you get to that point where you could actually separate yourself from what was happening to you? Because, what's happened for you versus what's happening to your life is happening for you versus to you. Man, people that are listening right now have gone through so much trouble. Like, how did you do this?
Well, we talked earlier about the concept of emotional maturity. And I'm very grateful at that time. I got a quarter of a century of being in this game. If I can't walk my talk at that point, then I shouldn't be here. So, yeah, there's an element of that. Would I expect the average guy off the street to turn the other cheek? Again, when you hear it from different levels of surrender or different levels of consciousness, it interprets differently. If you turn round to somebody in victim and say, turn the other cheek, like Jesus said, then they're going to see that as being dominated by being like, bullied, etc., giving up. If you say that to somebody in pride, turn the other cheek, they're going to say, no freaking way. All right? I'm going to stand up and defend myself. I'm not going to have sand kicked in my face, you idiot. You say that's somebody who's more spiritually enlightened, and turning your cheek is a strength beyond a strength. It means I can't be pushed, pulled, cajoled, controlled. Can you imagine me spending my time in there planning revenge versus planning how I can help people? I'd have had a very different experience. And so understanding where you are on that journey is that was part of the test for me, part of the graduation. Could I let go of that? What's that really going to do? And we've all heard the old adage, drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Well, that's who's the most important person in my movie? Well, clearly I am. So everything that I need to decide should be looked at through the lens of, is this going to add value to my movie or detract from it? Now you go to the terrible, killings that were in Paris several years ago. And what brought the entire world to tears was the letter the partner wrote of forgiveness to the terrorists about, was it a husband that they killed? Why? Because they weren't going to give them the satisfaction of carrying resentment. That's a strength beyond a strength. And very few people can get there other than intellectually, which is why you will have certain levels of events put in. But when the judge, just before the judge did the summing up to retire, and it looked like it was going to go the wrong way, I walked up to the opposing counsel. We were going to break for 20 minutes. And I walked up to the opposing counsel and his team. And I said, guys, you did an amazing job. And I shook their hands. They're doing their job. Shouldn't be angry at them. if I'd have hired them and I was Hewlett Packard, that's what I'd want to be paying for. Right? They're just, pulling stuff out of the bag and using their skill sets. Right? It's like a debate team. You try to win the debate. You don't care who's right or wrong. And I acknowledged that they were exceptionally skilled, and I was very courteous and said, thank you. I went to the Hewlett Packard team. They're just doing what lawyers litigate. Why would you be resentful of the fact that they litigate and they had a better job than you did, as you'd expect them with $250,000 worth of firepower? Yeah. And I had Kermit the Frog. It's like, it was almost predictable. So then you look past it. Do I live in a friendly universe or don't I? Am I going to resist this or am I not? Do I, or am I a fair weather sailor? Am I okay on the ship because the waves are flat and I'm kicking back with a margarita? Who shows up when the storms come? That's, that's when, fair sailors are not made on calm seas. As well, good sailors are not made on calm seas. So I went in there, and one of the things that I wrote and I put on the inside of my cell door was a sign that said, every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. Napoleon Hill 101. I would sometimes read that and stare at it 100 times a day. I had to believe that this was going to come good. And I thought, what else can I do to add value? Not sit on the pity pot. What can I do to add value? And that's when I came up with the idea of writing the letters to my students to show them what I was doing and how I was doing it. And that became the Inside Track. And that book has changed the lives of more people than anything else I could have done on podcasts or stage. It's been called the most transformational book. I mean, you look on the back, you've got quotes from legends, Brian Tracy, John Assaraf, Kevin Trudeau, John DeMartini, all these people I look up to. It says one of the most incredible books they've ever. In fact, John Assaraf called me afterwards and said, "You read it?" And says, "You do realize people in personal development are now going to have to go to prison just to keep their competitive advantage." Right? Because it demonstrates I could walk my talk. Now, okay, that's one thing. That's authenticity, and I'm glad that I could pass my own little test if, and that's for me to judge, nobody else. But what did that translate into? I lost a business, very profitable. I ended up being $350,000 in debt. Now, not only that, I had 0 credit rating when I came out. I was one of the first ever Black American Express card holders in the UK. Charter member, initial run, 1999. I had $1 million limit on my Amex. I had a beautiful relationship, multi-decade relationship with Amex. Highest credit rating. I could walk in and drop $1 million if I wanted. So my partner at the time, who was also then my fiance, who wedding was paid for in Portofino, that all got cancelled, because I was away, decided, and again, you've got to understand other people's point of view, decided that I was going to have to go bankrupt. I've got all this legal debt. I got people, we just spent 50 grand that month on Facebook ads to sell 50 grand's worth of tickets to my seminar. So we broke even, but then you put the people in the room, you upsell them on a program if it's of value to them. But now we've got 50 grand's worth of people want their money back because I'm being called a shyster that I've gone to prison. I mean, absolute shit show. And so not only that, my partner at the time decided that, well, if you're going to go bankrupt in English law, if you're going to go bankrupt for $500,000, go bankrupt for $1 million, there's no difference, right? So they need some money for the next 6 months to live on. So they'll take my supplementary black card. Because give my partner a black, supplementary black card. Go get your shopping and petrol and nails and hair. Don't bother me. Just go. But I'm still responsible, right? So they thought they'd have a jolly wizard idea that if I'm going to go bankrupt for X, then go bankrupt for Y. So they went to Harrods and bought some Rolexes and to sell, and they ran it to their PayPal and paid off their BMW and took their family to Selfridges. And the irony was that when I came out of Pentonville, I actually owed more money to American Express than I did Hewlett Packard. Right? Which meant my credit rating went so far through the toilet that I couldn't open a bank account. So I'm $350,000 in the hole, can't even open a bank account, wouldn't give me a checkbook or a credit card. Still don't have a credit card to this day, by the way, since coming out of. And I've got to get back on my feet. So what happens? Do you get anxious? No, you get excited. I never climbed out of a hole that deep before. This will be fun. I know the rules. Do I believe them or don't I? Do I live in a friendly universe or not? Anyway, a year after I came out, I published the Inside Track, just a collection of letters, because my students said it had that much of an impact on them, it would help a lot of other people. It was never meant to be a book. And it's not written after the facts. It's not like a memoir. This is unfolding in real time, page by page. I don't even know what's going to happen on the next page as I'm writing it. So I put it out, and went Amazon #1 in 4 hours, outsold 3 suppliers on the first day, and has been called one of the greatest books ever written in personal growth because it's real. Now, that's one part of the story. What's another part? A few years later, I did an audit on our CRM. How many people have come into my environment, bought one of my coaching programs, who their first touch of my work was reading the Inside Track? People that I wouldn't have known or wouldn't have reached before. And what has that been worth to me in terms of income? At that time, we were closing in on about $8 million. Now, let me ask you a question, both of you. Probably not so much for you, Paul, after what you said, but I'll throw it out there. If someone said to you, you may be struggling a little, listen, we're going to put you in prison for 6 months and pay you $8 million. Somebody's going to be tempted. Somebody's going to turn around and say, hey, could I do a year for 16? Right? It's like every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. I never wrote those letters ever thinking they'd make me money. That wasn't the point. I was focused on adding value. But I trusted the universe. I trusted it would come good. I trusted the bends in the river, even though I couldn't see around the corners. I trust the fact that ultimately I'm going to be looking back on this and saying, wow, now that was part of a movie that I would never swap. Because what makes a great movie? Everything. Comedy, tragedy, romance, heartache, drama, joy. You want to leave the cinema after a movie emotionally spent, saying, wow, now that is a film I'd pay to watch again. And when we film the final scene of the movie of our lives, that's the kind of conversation I want. Not, I had a safe, boring movie. Because one thing I can tell you right now, nobody pays good money to go to the cinema to watch James Bond rescue a kitten out of a tree for 90 minutes. That's not what you want in a James Bond movie. You want action and blowing up and saving the world and Bond girls and all of that kind of stuff. And then at the end of this game, we don't get to take the props with us, do we? And you're filming Fast and the Furious and you're Vin Diesel. At the end of the movie, you don't get to keep the cars. You think you get to keep anything here in this movie? No. I have a beautiful home here in Tenerife now. And it's only, 8 years ago since I came out of prison, 7 years since I landed on the island here, $250,000 in debt. I'd managed to climb up to $250,000 in debt 7 years ago. I now own a, beautiful multi-million-dollar home that's the size of Wembley. It's one of the most incredible places on the entire island. I just picked up my McLaren this morning I'd just been to Barcelona for a service. Now I've got, tens of millions of dollars of anything I could ever want to spend on. And guess what? I own nothing. I may be simply just a custodian of it while I'm here. So what kind of custodian do I want to be? Do I want to let it go to my head? No, because if I lose everything tomorrow, does it define me? Of course not. Who I am, my self-worth is not my net worth. Who I was in prison, walking through those gates, $250,000 in debt, lost my wedding, lost my business, lost everything, lost my reputation at that point. I was walking 10 feet tall as an undercover Jedi. I could have had a whole load of reasons to get mad, angry, vengeful, upset, depressed. Oh yeah. What do you want to choose to focus on? Because both games are available. I could offer you both $100,000 to write 10 things about your life that are great, and you'd win the $100,000. I'll give you the same 100 grand. Write me 10 things that suck about your life right now. You ain't leaving the room without the 100 grand. It's not the good or bad things happen. No. What do you want to focus on? Yeah, exactly, Laura. Mud or stars?
Do you have a failure that didn't become a good story or an inspiration? Is there one that just didn't quite manifest into something that you could figure out or fathom or turn around to say, okay, I see the silver lining in this?
I don't know. Probably my first girlfriend breakup, maybe. I don't know. Um, there's always going to be things that you have to trust, because let's just say that you have a car accident and you're like, I can't see any benefit in this because, yeah, I was late for the job interview and I didn't get the dream job I wanted. And now, yeah, I can't afford to get it repaired. And it turns out the guy wasn't insured. And where's the good in this? What you may be missing is the fact that that accident saved you 2 blocks away from being killed by a semi-truck. You've got to have faith and belief that this friendly universe, everything happens in your favor. Everything goes according to plan. It may not be the plan my left brain wants. It may not be the plan that my comfort zone wants. But I've got to have some level of belief that even if I don't see the benefit, it stopped me from going over a waterfall. And so there's that aspect to it. Are there certain things that don't immediately present themselves as like, oh, here's the silver lining? Yeah. Sometimes you got to look with a pair of binoculars to find it. And sometimes even if it doesn't show up, you just got to trust the fact that, better this than what it could have been.
Did you lose a lot of friends, Peter, as a result when you came out? And maybe not obviously at first, but they drifted over time, or they reached out a little bit less, or they were embarrassed because they didn't reach out to you during that time?
Combination. There was a lot of people that took it at face value and ran for the hills. Brian Rose, Dave Asprey, both took down my interviews that were helping thousands of people. A lot of my friends, some of them have since apologized and said, I never came to see you in prison. I just thought, oh, there's Pete doing what Pete does. I'm a maverick. And people with our kind of energy, what I call the indigo energy, we push boundaries. We don't like institutional authority. We play by our own rules, and we have our own set of values. And hopefully, people aren't less than because they cross our path. But we don't play by the rules because we didn't write or agree on the rules that we don't like. Right? That's not a moral thing. It's more of a moral thing, because half the stuff that I class as rules, I just don't agree with. Right? Not because I'm egocentric, because it's written by people that have no freaking clue about how life works. That aside, my little moral soapbox, you have some people that thought, oh, well, that's just Pete. You hear teachers in school and on reports, he's either going to end up wildly successful or in jail, right? I mean, it's that kind of character, right? Because you push boundaries. But there was also people that when they saw how I showed up, when they saw what I did, as I say, courage and stress is miracles. When they saw how people, how I treated people, how I rose to the occasion rather than shrunk in their mind, there was very much a turning point of, oh, wow. And then when people finally got to realize what the detail was, and it was all smoke and mirrors from Hewlett Packard over some bullshit, I didn't rip anyone off. I didn't break any contracts. I didn't do anything I wasn't supposed to do. I fought back against what I thought was a bully boy legal firm representing a bully boy financial behemoth that felt they could do what they want. And I'm like, that doesn't sit with me. But they use the court system in a way that I'm not experienced in, and they won. They're better chess players at that game. Fair credit. But there was definitely people that have gone, and whether they're embarrassed or not, haven't come back. But the people that judge me, everybody judges everyone. It's human nature. Do I worry about that? Do I care about it? No, of course not. Everyone's got their own model of the world. There's a lot of people that have, you mentioned Andy earlier, Andy Harrington. Yeah, Andy and I hardly ever spoke. And Andy said he read the inside track that I was a lunatic. Right? It's like, some people get it, some people don't. That's okay. Yeah, if Brian Rose called me up and asked me for dinner tomorrow, of course I'd go. He's a good guy. But was he acting out of his own self-interest and pride? Was he caught up in some, pattern of how he judges things? Of course. We're all human. And nobody is as great as their best deed, and nobody is as lowly as their worst. Sometimes good to remember that.
What about coming to the rescue of other people? So let me kind of frame that. If life is happening for you and not to you, and you're maybe even subconsciously creating your own tests, in a situation like, you pick any dictator, pick Nazi Germany, for example, that's like the extreme of this. Or pick the person down the street who's getting, thumped, and you see them, but your wife or your partner saying, don't go down that alley, like don't go help, because you might put your life in at risk. If life is happening for that person over there, and you're like, that's not a life that I would want, and that life might actually be snuffed out pretty quickly, and I'm the only one I think that maybe can do something about it. Where is the boundary of I'm going to jump in and be the superhero and at least try to help, assist, advise even in some cases? Or how much of that should I let that happen for that person and just mind my own freaking business, put my head down?
It's a great question. And when we talk about moral boundaries and dilemmas, it's always interesting to explore. For me personally, I said earlier, it's about tuning in. I've been in situations where you've got a guy hitting his girlfriend in a nightclub, and I'm about to step in, and my friend has pulled me back. He was a lot older and wiser, and he says, don't get involved. And as he did that, some other guy got involved to pull off the guy, and the woman starts hitting the guy that's pulling him off. Right? And there's certain times where you tune in. Then there's a time where you see somebody being beaten up or what have you, and you feel that you can step in and stop it, and you feel that it's your responsibility to do so. You make the call. If it's right, damn right. If it's like, well, hang on a minute, then there's going to be two of us that'll be injured, stabbed, and robbed, then maybe the best thing is to run and try and find a policeman, for example. So it's not about a selfish perspective of it's my movie, you're dealing with it. I mean, we wouldn't be in the game of trying to help other people if that was our nature. But what is the number one rule of coaching? Pretty simple. In 30 years, I'm sure you'd agree with me on your experience as well. It's this. If you want something for somebody else more than they want it for themselves, you're wasting your time. The other angle to look at here is, and it's hard when you care about the person, especially if they're a relative or a sibling or something like that. We see people that are self-sabotaging, that are on drugs, that are essentially banging their head against the wall. And we're like, look, if you only did this, or let me help you do that, because we don't want to be in pain. No right conscious person with a pulse likes to see other people in pain, or animals in pain. It's not who we are. We don't want to see suffering. So you have to understand that there's also the side that some people need to hit their head on the sidewalk in order to learn how to tie their shoelaces. In other words, I also have no right in order to take away somebody else's lesson. When we look in our own mirror and see a lot of the lessons that we've learned came through the hardships that we didn't get help from, where we had to hit threshold. Otherwise, you also run the risk of adding what we call secondary gain. See, why do people take drugs? It's only one of 6 reasons. Oh, predominantly 4. To meet one of the main human needs, whether that's significance, certainty, variety, or connection. I say 6 because there's also growth and contribution, and drugs don't really offer that. But at some point, the people that quit drugs are the people that have to draw a line in their own sand saying, I'm tired of waking up in my own vomit. Versus, oh, I take drugs. Why? Because people run around me and my family try to support me, and they've put me in rehab, and I've come out and I've lapsed again. And now drugs is a vehicle for significance, because I don't have a significant education. I don't have a significant bank balance. I don't have a significant place to live, but I have a significant problem. Oh, I get connection. When I'm working with drug addicts, the first question I ask them, Who are you without your problem? Because most of them have no idea. And the reason rehab doesn't work, because what rehab does is they put it in an environment where you can control the biochemistry. But actions are preceded by thoughts, and thoughts are based upon habitual patterns of thinking underpinned with needs. So if you don't replace the needs that the drugs are giving, you're going to clean the environment and they're going to come out. Well, where do they get the significance from now? Where do they get connection people running around trying to help them now? If you don't replace that, they're going to fall straight back into the same vehicle, and then you're into the rehab yo-yo. So if I see somebody being beaten up on the street because they decided to walk down a dark alley with a sign up saying, yeah, I think muggers are idiots, or walk around with holding their wallet out, flashing their cash in the nightclub as they walk out, trying to be significant, some people have got to learn their lessons. So it's a call. It's a judgment call. Do you get it right all the time? Of course not. We're in Earth School. We often get more feedback from the answers we get wrong in school than the ones we get right. But ultimately, you tune in. There is no hard and fast rule. But don't make it black and white. Should you do this or should you do that? Because life doesn't run on a color palette that way.
So in the framing of, let's say, Rory and Martin's archetypal relationships, how much do you think that factors into that decision, right? I'm guessing from what you're saying, you're in the magician warrior realm, probably leading with magician and then warrior second to that. But if you were, let's say, the wolf, the immature form, more so, can you even help yourself from jumping in and taking that smash bottle on the head that was due to the boyfriend?
It's a question that relates exactly back to what we said earlier about levels of emotional maturity. And by the way, you call it bang on. I'm magician warrior in that order. So, if you've got a sheep that's walking down the street, if you've got more of a lover mentality, someone who's conflict averse, they have they're going to be the ones that are going to want somebody to do something about it. Mm-hmm. They're going to feel the whether that's a policeman, or that's a bouncer, whether that's Jack Reacher walking down the street, doesn't matter. They're going to want it stopped. They just know they're not the ones to do it, right? If you've got a warrior walking down the street, more likely to step in or have the attitude of not being as averse to that. And then it's a call, if I'm bigger than them, or if there's 5 of us and there's 2 of those, then you've got kind of a law of nature factors in a little bit as well. But archetypes are, and I love Rory's work with this because he's pretty peerless when it comes to how to articulate the sense of human personality and how it relates to each other. I'm a huge fan of his work around that. But you are going to be predisposed to whatever your conditioning or archetype is going to push forward through. And maybe as an immature warrior or wolf that then gets beaten up, that causes you to question whether you should be the sheriff walking around because that's what gives you your ego, versus next time having a little bit more discernment because you're emotionally mature. When I was in Pentonville, there was a lot of violence. And I was walking amongst these people. Now, yes, I'm 6'3". Yes, I have an air that doesn't exude victim. And there's a lot of people in there that did. But walking through and looking to disarm levels of conflict was something that I was very proactive with. But I couldn't do it by having bigger muscles in the playground because there's always bigger muscles in the playground. And in that place, you're seeing Shawshank, right? You go to the, or Prison Break, and you go to the prison yard. I ain't the biggest guy in the prison yard, right? Everyone wanted to pick a fight with Mike Tyson when he went away so they could say they beat up Mike Tyson, right? It's like there's always bigger games. So I couldn't do that. And the way that I stated it to my students when I came out, do I have a warrior that I could fall back on? Absolutely. But if I'd have got involved in a fight in Pentonville, which was not difficult, I would have considered that a catastrophic failure of my magician. Because I can talk a lot faster than most people hit.
I want to call a spade for a second. You mentioned about the addicts that you've worked with. I think that entrepreneurs, if they don't already understand they're addicts, they're just in denial, because the entrepreneurship, the opportunity is the drug. So should we be asking ourselves, who am I without the business?
I think that the greatest question is, why am I building the business? Because if you peel that back, am I starting a business for significance? Am I starting it for certainty? Am I starting it because I hate my boss and my job? Am I starting it because I'm trying to prove to my elder brother that's successful that I'm just as good? Am I trying to prove to my parents that I'm worthy of something? Am I trying to prove to my school teacher who's now dead, who said I'd never amount to anything? Those are the questions you want to ask. Because where you want to be leading is, am I starting this business as an expression of my passion to be able to add value to the world, to be as a vehicle to give my gift? Because if that's the case, let's play, win or lose. You're going to be fueled by inspiration at times of despair at that point, versus you're going to be, other times, because there is no certainty in business, there's no certainty in life, but there's definitely no certainty in business, right? If you're doing it in order to try to be significant, it's almost like, and I don't want to do a stereotype here on women, but I've had girls that want to date me because I'm 25 and I've got a Ferrari. And there's a certain type of person that would appeal to, that's looking for the certainty. But 2 years later, and I lose everything and I'm back in my Mini, the girl's not there. What do you know? There's no more champagne on the bar, so they're looking for somebody else that can pour it. Do I want to marry somebody like that? Do I want a long-term relationship with somebody? No, of course not. There's elements to that. What you want to be asking is, what's your long-term relationship with your business? Are you still going to be the person that's there when it's not pouring you champagne because you're in love with what it is that you're doing? Or are you going to say, oh crap, this idea doesn't work. What else can get me the Moe or the Dom or whatever? So there's an element of that, if you translate it through the metaphor I just gave, that is really the question we want to be asking. Who are you without your business? That shouldn't change. I'm an entrepreneur. Do I need a business in order to be an entrepreneur? No. I've been unemployable for 36 years. I've had 27 businesses, national, international, some of which have failed majestically, some of which have wiped me out, some of which should have definitely stayed ideas when I was drunk, and everything in between. It's the thrill. It's not the having it, it's the getting it. We've all heard the adage, success is a journey, not a destination. What does that mean? Well, imagine going on holiday. You work your ass off. You finally got your 2-week vacation. You're going to a place you've been fantasizing about. You're going to Bora Bora. You've been saving up for 2 years, and you're finally going to go there. It's like, oh, wow, I can't wait till I get to the end and have accomplished this holiday. No, you don't say that. You don't get on the plane at the end of the 2 weeks and say, wow, I made it, done, tick that. No. You want to savor it. You want to go through the journey. You want to enjoy it. You want to experience it. Same with the business. Same with life. You don't say, oh, finally I made it. No, it's the journey. It's not like, oh, I need the business to pay me the million and then I'll finally be happy. See, that's playing the fateful game most people do. There's 3 games that sum up most of what I've been talking about. The victim mentality is summarized in the 3 words, feel great if. I'd feel great if that happens to me and I make the million. I'd feel great if that hadn't have happened to me and that person hadn't have done this or whatever. It's victim. Never going to happen. Most achievers and entrepreneurs, unfortunately, are playing the feel great when game. I feel great when I make my first million. I feel great when I close this deal. I feel great when I pay off the house. I feel great when. You want to be a really fulfilled entrepreneur, not someone trying to be successful? Because there is a massive difference between a life-chasing success versus a life-chasing fulfillment. And the key is in swapping the last word. Feel great now. Why? Because I get up, I'm alive, I'm living in a time in human history my ancestors have dreamed about, and I get to go play this game called business. I get to go try stuff. I get to go try to add value. I try to think what could help my my clients. I get to do this stuff. I get to enjoy this thing. Not like, oh wow, I finally got to the end of the business and made some money and cashed out and hit my number. What happens next? Go look at all the people that do. Within 5 years are on antidepressants. Feel great now. Not feel great now as long as. Not feel great now because. Not feel great now, if this doesn't happen. That doesn't work. That's why I could walk into prison smiling. That's why I could walk out $250,000 debt excited. Because I play feel great now. Is it 24/7? We're human. Right? You're going to have times. But where do you live? Where do you visit? You live in McDonald's. You can visit the gym once in a while. It ain't going to do a lot. You live in the gym. You can visit McDonald's once in a while. It's not going to change a lot. So that's where I try to aspire.
How do you prepare your partner for this up and down roller coaster? And also, how do you stay on track with that person to make sure that you guys are locked arms and you got the brace on and you don't fall out of the chair, when the thing turns around and goes upside down a few times?
It's, who you attract, a lot of the time it's opposites. We know that, just part of the game. But you want to be, say, attracting somebody long-term that is supportive and understands and appreciates you as much as you appreciate them. Nadia, my partner, we've been together for 5 years now. She understands. I mean, she comes from Bulgaria. Bulgaria is very much the tradition there, and I'm not trying to stereotype here, nor am I trying to pigeonhole or label, but just sharing my experience. Nadia says that a lot of her people, culture, the women love supporting the men. She's a supporter. I love that. Yep. I don't need a co-pilot. I need a wingman, wing girl. That's, I'm out there trailblazing. I wouldn't ask somebody else to do that. I'm the one that's rowing the Atlantic. I need somebody at home looking after the dogs. Speaking of which, she's just walking in. All right. So we're talking about partners and wing people and everything else. Here she is. No, a quick hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
It's Paul Bible.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah. So explain about how does a partner cope with the life of a fast-moving entrepreneur, rowing Atlantic and everything else. And I was kind of explaining that, that having the support of somebody that, I know I have to accept them. That's not what they want to do. It's not who I want to be with. I'm not looking for a competitor. I'm looking for somebody to support. Nadia, and I was saying, Bulgaria is a culture. You were saying the women are very happy to support the men if the men are producers and want to go out and actually do things. And that's very lucky for me. Now, I'm not looking to partner. You get power couples, the Hormozis or Brand Cardone. They want to build the businesses together. That's great for them. Not my thing. Nadia was with me 5 years ago. I told you I didn't have a lot 5 years ago. She's not here because I had a McLaren when she met me. Right?
We didn't.
No, definitely didn't. And where can I get dog food? It was more of a question. So you're looking for somebody who's loyal, that appreciates where you are, that knows there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, because that's the life that I choose to live, and is happy to support that in the way that they can bring their amazing gifts to the table with. That'd be how I'd share it. And you just are lucky if you find somebody that fits that picture. And you may be a person who is a supporter listening to this, and you may be fine with two people being supporters, just supporting each other. That's okay. But the people listening to this kind of podcast tend to be a little bit more momentum driven, forward thinking, want to go out there. And I've seen it on both sides. I've had a lot of ladies whose husbands are not supportive of their journey of trying to be independent financially, for example. It's tough if you don't have a partner that gets you.
Yeah, I saw the movie The Odyssey this week, Peter. And it's come to mind more than once in this conversation where I'm thinking about you. And every time they pull into an island to get food, I'm like, oh God, it's like it's similar to your own experience. It's like, what cyclops are you going to meet, or what giants, or what is that challenge that's hidden behind the perceived joy of having found somewhere to go get food? But then at the same time, what made that an amazing movie like why is it called the Odyssey is because of the massive emotional swings in terms of they went to achieve this pinnacle that was nothing like they thought it was. And it was interesting to listen to Odysseus at the end of the movie and talking about how, that experience of Troy just changed him, but not in the way he thought. And he had to go and cleanse his soul literally in the water and completely let go to be cleansed, which is kind of interesting. It overlays a lot on your story, I feel, in many ways.
Yeah, I wonder if he was changing a rudder at the time.
I don't think this thing had a rudder.
Maybe his underwear. That's about it.
I'm glad there was no Cyclopses. Yeah, there was a lot of other stuff, but yeah, no Cyclopses, thankfully.
Something that came to mind there when I'm going to go back a little bit in terms of we talked about the magician warrior scenario. You're probably not going to remember this, Peter, but I do, because when I first did Rory's work, and I'll pass or leave it in the past after that, but you made a comment in the audience because I was watching a recording, so that's why I remember it, because I would have watched it a couple of times when Rory was talking about each of the archetypes, and maybe he doesn't use these recordings anymore, but you were in the audience and he was speaking about the sovereign, and you took the mic and you said, that's got to be the end game. And that really stuck with me. I was like, oh, like there was no commentary really on Rory after that saying correct or wrong or otherwise, but what I was really interested in was that was your view, that you saw the sovereign as kind of an elevated archetype of the four, that ultimately to get to that place would be, like you said, would be the end game. Are you still of that view now, years later? It's probably 6-7 years ago.
Yes. And the reason for that is that the sovereign is ultimate governance. And if you allow the other archetypes to govern them, again, if you look at it through the lens of a being in a tool shed, a carpenter is going to want to saw wood. A jeweler is going to want a small screwdriver and repair watches. Now, you've got a welder is going to want to weld. Each identity around the tradesman, shall we say, is going to want to do what they do. You have a health issue, you go to a surgeon, he'll recommend cutting. Go to a radiologist, they'll recommend chemo. You get the idea. Go to a naturopath, they're going to recommend something natural. Everyone's looking through their own lens. So if you allow the warrior to be dominant in the ultimate level, even if it's a mature warrior, which should be more the way of the peaceful warrior, it's still looking through the warrior's lens. Same with the magician, same with the lover. The sovereign, I see as the conductor of the orchestra. They're the ones that select the tool that is appropriate for the job. You don't want a hammer when you're repairing watches. So to me, what the sovereign represents, the mature version, is the level of governance over your life from an emotionally mature perspective. The end game is, we all want to get to the end of our life and be essentially to use Rory's language, an elder. Right? An elder being somebody that's wise enough to be able to give the benefit of the movie that they've starred in, the path that they've walked, to help other people be guided on the path that they're walking. So I see the sovereign as the end game for that. Now, ultimately, what is the game that we are playing is the game of love. So the lover, you could make an argument for as ultimately the destination is you want to become loving. But I still see in this lifetime, this movie, that I would rather be a mature sovereign than a mature lover, because the mature sovereign knows how to employ or engage or summon the mature lover when it's required. You don't want a mature lover standing at the gate when the barbarians come. They're going to want to give them a hug and wonder why they got ran through with a sword. There's a time and a place. But ultimately, it's the sovereign that makes the call. If you put the magician on the throne, if Merlin's on the throne, you've got a hell of a party going on, but nothing's really getting done. You put the warrior on the throne, you've got a dictatorship. You put the lover on the throne, you ain't got any borders or boundaries. Sovereign's where it's at for me.
Mm-hmm. So that leads me to the next question around, as the world is unfolding at the moment in the world of AI, very few people are taking a sovereign view of what's about to happen. It seems to be quite the opposite, right? Everybody's seeing it through their own lens and obviously looking to protect their jobs, the ring from me first type view. How do you see this rolling out in your experience over the next couple of years? You net positive, neutral? Is it going to be a tipping point where we could start to see a revolution of some form?
Bob Proctor was once asked, what do you think the next 12 months is going to give? And his answer was quite insightful, and I think it's pertinent to what it is you're saying. He said, well, I'm pretty certain I can predict the next 12 months because, the next 12 months is going to be the same as the last 12 months. And I could also say that the next 5 years is going to be the same as the last 5 years, and the next 5,000 years will be the same as the last 5,000 years when it comes to how things are moving and what's happening. And this is doing. So there's two things: challenge and opportunity. There is going to be challenge and there's going to be opportunity. There always has been, there always will be. How you look through the lens, how you adapt to that, how you rise to the challenge and take advantage of the opportunity, or how you fall, determines the life that you live in your movie. So I'm excited. AI's changed a huge amount of things to me. Yes, I let go of a third of my staff. Now, you say, well, what about the staff? They'll adapt. People do. People are not fragile. People are only fragile if they believe the bullshit that they're being told about how fragile they are and the economy is and this, that, the other, by tuning into anti-social media. And the leadership team that I have right now, I'm getting at least 300% more productivity out of them than I was at the beginning of this year, based upon how we all use AI, predominantly Claude Cowork, and what that's done for us. It's been phenomenal. So I'm very bullish. Does it provide people that want to have opportunities, better tools than they've ever had before? Absolutely. So you could make the argument either way, but it remains the same. There's going to be challenge and opportunity. Now, one thing that we also know, if you do want to take a slightly bigger view, is that where we are in the world right now is pretty unsustainable. It's unsustainable largely because more people are looking through the fear lens than the love lens, if you want to chunk it down, simplicity. There's a lot more self-interest than there is non-self-interest. In fact, when I was speaking at the United Nations, one of the first things I said when I opened my speech, having watched all the squabbles that morning, was this really should be called the United Nothing. Because the whole principle of United Nations is not a United Nations at all. It's a misnomer. It's a language misdirect. There are no unilateral national interests. It's a collection of individual national interests arguing for what they can get. That's the UN. Anyway, so if you look at moving forward and you kind of say, chunk it down, and in this unsustainable era or epoch of human history, I go to the nature, especially in Africa. There's a lot of ecosystems in Africa that by its very design are due to burn to the ground every 30, 40 years. By design. To make room for other stuff. Now, are we going to have to burn some stuff to the ground? I think so. Is the economy going to collapse? We're going to have to reinvent money? Are we going to blah, blah, blah? Yeah, maybe. But I'm starring in my movie, just as everybody else is starring in their movie. And I know that I have the power to create my reality based upon the quality of my thoughts. So I don't play the what's going on in other people's dramas game. I want you to imagine it this way, and I'll leave you with this as a metaphor. if you go to Universal Studios in Hollywood, I was in Hollywood, a couple of months ago. I was filming the Lewis House podcast and Natty's first trip. So I was there, and I was Hollywood Studios. If you go onto Hollywood Studios or Universal Studios, Sony Studios, any of those lots, what you'll have is you'll have a whole bunch of what we call sound stages. So you have stage 49, stage 12, stage 6. And if you're going to film a movie, or let's say you're filming the Tonight Show, or whatever it is, Oprah, they have their own sound stage. And it's fitted out with whatever it is for their pertinent to their particular series or what have you, or that movie. So let's say you are on soundstage number 44, Paul. We're going to put you in 44. You're filming the movie, Paul's Life. So you're in that soundstage, and you're focused on filming your movie. Now, let's just say you want to go out and get a coffee on set. There's a Starbucks somewhere on the lot. So you walk out of your soundstage, and you're walking out to go get your Starbucks. And all of a sudden, you look over, and in soundstage number 36, somebody catches your attention, says, hey, Paul, come over here. We need you to have a look. Have a look. Let's go. They're filming a drama in there. And they're like, listen, we need some film extras. Could you mind just getting involved and just doing this part for me? And before you know it, you've just been recruited as an unpaid film extra in somebody else's drama. Now, some people are born to star in a drama. Some people, as I said, have to hit their head on the sidewalk to learn how to tie their shoelace. Some people's lives are a horror show. Some are a soap opera. I'm in the love, action, and abundance movie. Love, adventure, and abundance movie. That's my movie. That's what I want to film. That's what I like. Yep. Other dramas going on? 100%. Did you know there's actually about 8 billion sound stages in Earth studios? The question isn't, what's going on in there? The question is, how focused are you in living the best life you can live? Because the best thing you can do for the poor is not be one of them. Oh, that sounds selfish. No. Let me phrase it this way. Can you help a cancer patient by getting cancer? Can you get depressed enough to help a depressed person get off Prozac? Can you go bankrupt enough to help a poor person become wealthy? No. See, your responsibility, as Gandhi said, is be the change you want to see in the world. You get to do 2 things in this life, and only 2 things. You get to be the example and the invitation. And you have to let go of what other people do with the invitation. That's their movie. And some people are born to star in a drama. But if we compromise our movie because we're trying to fix everybody else's, and there's people that run down that path, or if we get sucked into, oh my God, do you know that there's 27 dramas currently being filmed at Universal Studios? Oh my God, right? You turn on the news and, this is going to happen, and the Bitcoin's going to go to zero, and, some country I've never been to is going to go to war with some other country I've never been to, and some other bullshit. Give me a freaking break. I'm responsible for being the best version of me in my movie. I have zero interest. And if something's important in what else is going on Earth Studios, if something's important, it'll find me. So I can do a lot more good. I've given away more tens of thousands of dollars this year to people and causes that I like that I've probably done in any other year I've done. I'm enjoying it. Could I do that if I was focused on watching the news and building a bunker against the incoming Armageddon, some other bullshit someone's trying to convince you of? No. Self-preservation. If Tenerife volcano goes off tomorrow, right, which, by the way, it hasn't gone off for about 204 years, and it's due to go off about every 200. So, hey, if it sneezes tomorrow, do you know what's going to happen? I'll deal with it. And I'll have an adventure. And hopefully nobody gets hurt, just a bit of a sneeze. Scare away the tourists. I'll have more parking spaces. Be fine. I'll figure it out. It's like I don't get caught up in trying to hypothesize about other people's dramas, movies, soap operas, adventures, love stories. I'm trying to put one foot in front of the other the best I can in my movie. For most people, that's hard enough. But change your thinking to your own movie and stop getting recruited as an unpaid film extra in some big budget disaster movie you're convinced is going on, when you turn on the freaking news. That'd be my take.
How does preparation play into this? When you did the Atlantic your own Odyssey, right? Obviously, there had to be some preparation for that. And on a day-to-day basis, say someone's listening to this right now saying, you know what, I finally realized that I'm on the journey. I might not be completely prepared for it. I know that there's a certain amount of, I'm going to fly by the seat of my pants, and I think that's just inherent. You just don't know what's around the corner until you've went around the corner. How much preparation should people be doing for the life that they want for themselves?
There's two kind of levels to that. There are certain aspects where preparation is absolutely vital. The row would be a great example. If I hadn't prepared for that, I'd have been in trouble. It needs 2 years of certification, Royal Yacht Association training, marine navigation, ocean survival, VHF radio procedures, learning how to set up and row safely from La Gomera to hit a freaking small little opening on the coastline in Antigua 3,000 miles away. I mean, it's pretty freaking awesome when I even think about it myself, how we managed to do that, right? So prep is there, physical prep. But if you try to control what you can't control, not good. Could I control the waves, the weather, the storm, the capsize? No, of course not. I prepare myself to deal with the unexpected by being as certain as I can to handle uncertainty. But does that mean you should just wing it through life? Well, no, because that's gambling. And as we all know, the house always wins. So if you want to prepare your life to be a life of success, again, go to the movie of your life. Brad Pitt doesn't show up on stage, read the script once and go knock it out of the park. He rehearses, he shows up, he storyboards, he talks and gets feedback from the director and the acting coaches. You've got to prepare at that level. Can he control everything else on set? No. So for me, preparation is, am I willing to put in the work? Health is a great example. I've got a beautiful gym I built here on my property. And I've got great equipment. It's all been built to my spec on how I train with my workout. I've got beautiful spa in there, all the toys and red bed and blah, blah, blah. But does it lift the weights itself? Nah. I've got to put the time and effort in if I want the value. And when it comes to preparation, for me, that means getting enough sleep, getting up early, making sure I hit the gym, giving my body the nutrition it wants, listening to my body when there's aches or pains or a tweak on my back, or I'm actually too tired, but it's not an excuse. It's actually, no, my body says I need rest today, not training, and tuning in and following that. So preparation, absolutely. Are you prepared for success? Do you know what it's like to have money? Are you willing to understand what financial and abundance thinking is versus scarcity consciousness? Do you know how to be a good custodian of the success that you're looking to attract or say that you want? Do you know how to prepare yourself to be disciplined, to have a high internal balance sheet on the asset list? Are you willing to be prepared to endure the challenges because they're there to teach you something rather than run away from them? Preparation is key, but don't try to control what you can't control would be where I draw the line on that.
How do you prepare for success, and then how do you prepare for losing it all without attracting that into your life, as far as thoughts or things, right? You put it out there and you prepare so much, guess what? It's going to happen, inevitably. You're going to attract that to yourself. But how do you separate that? And then also, like you said, how do you prepare for that success? If you just take out a loan and then for 1 week live lavishly, like you have no, end of your bank account, say, I'm just going to prepare for this and see what happens. Like, how do you
wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah.
No, preparing for success is essentially divorcing yourself from the external sense data that tells you that you're not successful yet. It's like when I came out of prison, $350,000 in debt, no credit rating, nothing on radar, that would even remotely tell me I was successful. I felt successful because it's who I am. It's not what I do. As a result, money follows, opportunity follows. So preparing for success is adopting the identity of somebody who's successful, regardless of what's in your bank. When it comes to what happens if you lose it, there's a lot of feast famine in the entrepreneurial world. I went through that cycle several times. And one of the reasons is, where's your attention? See, when you're zeroed out and you're on your way up, you're focused on making it. When most people then, let's say, make it, whatever they interpret that as, they switch their focus from making it to not losing what they've made. At which point they start losing it because their focus is now on not losing it. And the brain doesn't process negation. And they forgot the kind of energy they had going up the ladder. Now they're focused on how do I stay tightly at the top of the ladder? And that level of neurosis causes them to wobble and fall off. So, I would say preparing for success is just knowing that you are. Divorcing your self-worth and your net worth. Again, you've got to learn to be bigger than your sense data. All your sense data is doing is showing you historically where you've been, not where you are. Just as if I asked you to stand in front of the mirror and take your shirt off, you don't see what you had for breakfast. You see what you had for breakfast for the last 5 years. It's a historic representation. I say, show me your bank account. I don't see what deal you did today. I see your financial, patterning for the last 5 years. So don't judge who you are today by where you are today. Start focusing on, okay, if I'm going to be 5 years from now in better shape financially or physically, who do I need to be today in order for that 5 years down the line to manifest it as I want?
Is the one thing of that pushing it further away from you, or should you kind of almost fake it till you make it in your mind? Like that whole idea of like, I am already successful, I am already rich, or I am already like whatever that person wants to be. If they want to be a famous lawyer, I am already a famous lawyer, but you just got out of like paralegal school. Like how much of that is faking it, and how much of it is like literally being in that 10,000 hours of mastery?
It has to do with the congruency of the relationship between your heart and your mind. See, if you stand in front of a mirror and say, I'm a millionaire, I'm a millionaire, I'm a millionaire, right? Yeah, because your mind's trying to tell you you're a millionaire, and your heart says, I can't even pay my credit card on Friday. That you've got a doubt, a wedge of doubt that's separating it. When your heart and your mind are congruent, I'm already the world's best lawyer. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I was 17 years old. I had a keyring that says trainee millionaire. I was cashing in my unemployment check at that time. But I believed it. I knew it. Spielberg walked onto the lot and put director Steven Spielberg on an empty freaking cabin and started shooting 8mm freaking films. He knew he was going to be one of the greatest directors of all time. Tiger Woods knew not he was going to be a good golfer, not he was going to be even a future PGA Tour. He knew he was going to be the greatest golfer of all time. Now, at the time he made that decision, would he be able to win a PGA Tour? No. But his belief, his conviction, his unity of heart and mind was so strong that that's what manifested it. So there's no fake it till you make it. There is, I believe it with congruency, and the outer world will catch up.
Yeah, well, I agree. I've lived that myself, so I can't argue that point. Peter, I just want to say we're very, very appreciative of the time. You've been on well over 2 hours now. Just a couple of things. How can people find you? Where is it you'd like to direct people? Anything like that?
I would say that I'm pretty available online. We just got our YouTube channel back. I'm very blessed for that. We got deleted and took down for 6 weeks because it got hacked, but we managed to recover it. So that's all back. Yeah, Peter Sage. Yeah, on either website petersage.com, or I'm pretty much all over social, etc. Very happy for you guys to put out whatever links you can. For example, I'm excited about promoting again. The Inside Track is a great book, and it's always good to recommend books because leaders are readers, and I'm a great believer that people that take the time to actually read a book rather than listen to a podcast or an audio book, because audiobooks these days are a cop out. People have them because they want to multitask. They're trying to get the information, but it's passive learning. You can tune in, you can tune out. Reading is active learning. You've actually got to turn contrasting symbology off a page into meaning in your head, and it takes different levels of neural connections to be able to do that, and more energy to do that than it is to listen passively to something with headphones. So I'm a great believer in recommending books. There's 2 books I would recommend. One is mine because Paul mentioned it earlier, and it's a blatant book plug because it has literally changed the lives of everybody, which is The Inside Track. And the other is that probably the best book I've read on manifesting by another one of my mentors, Kevin, is Your Wish is Your Command, which I'm rereading at the time. I actually got it on here, which is a phenomenal book. And that talks a lot about mindset. And I got a permission from Kevin to give a copy of that away if anyone's interested. And on audio and PDF. If you want the hard copy, go buy it. I recommend it anyway, from wherever you want to buy it from. But as a thank you to listening to me babble on for 2 hours or 2.5 hours of jabbling, I'd be a gift to be able to give to your tribe, Paul, as well. And I set it up at petersage.com/wish. If you go there, you can download the audio and the PDF as a gift from me. If you're not into reading, can't help you. But hopefully you've got some benefit out of the last 2.5 hours of some of the stories. And I've been loving the questions, guys. I've been loving where you're at. But yeah, if you fancy that, petersage.com/wish, or go buy The Inside Track. And that'll give you some real meat on the bones when it comes to how to handle adversity, which is really the main theme of that book. Generating abundance and manifesting. Go to Your Wish.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm already logged in myself. Well, just a reminder as well, guys, to everybody, Peter is one of the legends that we have in the legends area in the scholars community. He was kind enough to include his ultimate self-mastery training program in there. So again, if you're not a member of the Rethink community on School, it's easy to join. School.com, that's with a K, /Rethink. And couple of times Peter comes in and does a couple of live sessions when we start to build big numbers again. So we'll hopefully be able to get back to that very soon. So again, thank you so much, Peter. Really, really appreciate it. The link again is petersage.com/wish. If you can, check out Amazon or Audible for this book. Fantastic read, The Inside Track. You won't regret it. It's one you might regret that you're going to stay up all night and read it and miss out on some sleep, but it'll be worth it. So thanks so much, Peter. Thanks everybody here that was live. Also, really appreciate it.
And it's been a real pleasure. Paul, George, you've again amazing time. I love what you guys are doing. Your school community is crushing it. There's a reason why you add as much value you do, and it's been a pleasure to come and try to leave a little thumbprint on that for you guys as well. So thank you for being you.
So if you're tired of starting habits which don't stick, then come and join our amazing Rethink community. You can use the link in the description to join. So it's a community where we support each other to start and grow and keep new habits. You can also download our Rethink Habits Planner while you're there, designed to help you track your new habit streaks. So go to rethinkhabits.com to download the planner and join the community today, or click on the link in the description. That's rethinkhabits.com, and I will see you there.